The townsfolk didn't pay much attention to the old white church anymore. Its roof sagged, windows cracked, and weeds grew up around the stone steps where brides once posed for photographs and children once chased one another after Sunday service. Now it stood quiet, weather-worn, forgotten, just like the woman who lived 2 cabins over from it. Mara Bell had once sat in the front pew every Sunday, hands folded in her lap, her soft brown hair pinned back neat, her eyes warm and lit with something gentle. That light was gone now. Her husband died in the flood that swept through Dry Rock 2 years back. Tried to save their mule, foolishly, and the river took them both. After that, Mara didn't return to church. She didn't return many places. Her home, a squat, weathered cabin tucked behind a stand of crooked juniper trees, was barely holding together. She kept to herself, mending her own clothes, cutting her own wood, dragging sacks of grain 1 mile home when the storekeeper refused to deliver anymore. There were rumors, as there always are. Some said she was losing her mind. Some said she talked to her dead husband late at night. Others just said she was plain cursed. Either way, she had no friends left. The wind howled hard that morning when the stranger rode in. He came from the north, alone, wearing a long dusted coat and a hat pulled low, horse walking slow like they'd come far. He didn't speak to anyone. He bought a bottle, drank from it outside the saloon, and sat under the awning where no one dared ask his name. The town had seen men like him before, the kind who had something buried behind the eyes. Men who didn't need to raise their voice to make people listen. Men with hands that had done things. But he wasn't looking for trouble. He watched. He watched Mara carry a bundle of wood from the edge of town, her shoulders trembling under the weight. He watched the sheriff's boy trip her as she passed by, just enough to make her fall forward and drop the bundle, then laugh as if it were a joke. She didn't say anything, just knelt slowly, brushing splinters off her arms, and picked the wood back up 1 stick at a time. The stranger sat still, didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. The people in Dry Rock weren't kind, not anymore. Not after the droughts, not after the killings, not after the mine closed. Everyone was tired and angry and looking for someone to put it on. Mara made an easy target, a widow with nothing, no children, no voice, no power. Her husband had owed debts. Men hadn't forgotten. That night, a storm rolled in over the plains. The sky turned yellow-gray, and the air held still like it was thinking too hard. Mara stayed in her cabin, rocking in her chair beside the hearth. The flames were low. She had run out of wood by then, but didn't go back into town to get more. She was tired enough to not care if the cold found its way in. She didn't hear the knock at first. It wasn't loud, just one solid thump on the door. She opened it slow. It was the man from town, the one her husband had borrowed from most. Nolan Frisk, heavy boots, big voice, a face that always looked like it was halfway through a sneer. "You got until next week," he said, stepping inside without asking. "Or I take this place. And whatever's in it." Mara backed up. She didn't answer. There was no point. Nolan looked around, hands on his belt. "Or maybe I'd take part of it now." She knew what he meant. Knew it like you know the storm's close when the wind dies and the air goes thick. She stepped back again, bumping into the edge of the table. Her voice barely worked. "Please." He didn't stop. She tried to push past him. He shoved her down. Her head hit the floor and rang out like an empty pail. She lay there, blinking slow, trying to breathe. He grabbed her wrist, dragged her toward the door. "We'll go where no one hears you." She kicked, weakly tried to twist. He didn't care. Outside, the rain had started, soft at first. The path was thick mud. He dragged her across it anyway. Her legs left 2 long streaks in the earth. No one looked. The saloon was loud. The sheriff was drunk. The people of Dry Rock had long ago stopped seeing anything that made them uncomfortable. But the stranger stood beneath the awning of the general store, arms crossed, soaked through, watching. He didn't say anything, just stepped down, silent, and walked toward them like he'd been waiting for it. Nolan stopped when he saw him. The stranger didn't raise a hand. Didn't shout, just stood there, rain dripping off the brim of his hat. "This ain't your business," Nolan said. The stranger didn't answer. "I said this ain't your." He moved faster than Mara thought a man could move. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, Nolan was on the ground, holding his nose, blood running thick between his fingers. The stranger didn't let him up. He leaned down, whispered something no one heard, and Nolan scrambled back on hands and knees, slipping in the mud before disappearing down the hill. Mara sat in the dirt, shaking, her dress torn and soaked. The stranger knelt beside her. He didn't ask if she was all right. He didn't speak at all. He just reached out, slow and steady, and took her hand. That was it. He helped her up like she was made of glass, like she'd break if he wasn't careful. He led her back to her cabin, still not speaking. He lit her fire, set a kettle on, and stood in the corner like he was waiting for something. She didn't know his name. He didn't offer it. But something broke in her, sitting there on the floor with her hands trembling and a stranger tending her fire. Something long buried rose up in her chest. Grief, maybe, or relief, or just the sudden strange realization that someone saw her. Really saw her. The kettle whistled. He poured a cup, placed it on the table, then went to the door. For the first time, he looked at her like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. She spoke first. "What?" He paused. Rain pounded on the roof. His eyes were tired. Nobody else would. Then he left. That night, Mara didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because something inside her had gone quiet for the first time in a long while. That stranger didn't save her, not really. But he reminded her what it felt like to not be alone. And for her, that was enough to start breathing again. A week passed after the night the stranger pulled Mara a bell from the mud, and life in dry rock carried on like nothing had happened. But for Mara, something had shifted. She didn't speak of it, didn't tell anyone about the man who'd held her hand in silence. But every time the wind brushed her cheek, or she stepped past the place where Nolan had dragged her, a strange warmth flickered in her chest. It wasn't hope exactly, just a small piece of something that hadn't been there before. The stranger didn't leave town. He kept to the edge of things, never staying in one place too long, never drawing attention. He slept in the abandoned blacksmith shed outside town and took odd jobs with no complaints. Fixed the broken fence behind the stable. Helped haul lumber to the schoolhouse. He didn't smile, didn't joke, but no one questioned his usefulness. His presence made people nervous, though no one could say why. Maybe it was the way he looked at you, like he already knew what you'd done. His name came quietly from the lips of old May Holloway, who ran the bakery and remembered everyone. Saw him once before, she told the tailor. In Carson's Hollow. Called himself Silas. Silas Reed, I think. Kept to himself there, too. Until a man turned up dead and Silas was gone. Rumors spread faster than fires in towns like Dry Rock. Some said he was a bounty hunter. Others said he was running from something. Mara heard all of it from behind her door, the whispers floating through her window with the dust. But she didn't believe the worst. You can tell what kind of man someone is by the way they hold silence. His had weight, not darkness. Stillness, not coldness. She saw him again 5 days after the night he helped her. This time, it was at the well near the center of town. Mara had come earlier than usual, hoping to avoid people, but he was already there, filling a bucket. When he turned and saw her, he didn't look surprised. He handed her the bucket without a word, then stepped back. "You don't have to keep helping me," she said, trying to keep her voice even. He looked at her, long and quiet. "You don't look like someone used to being helped." "I'm not." He nodded once and walked away. That was the beginning of it. Not a friendship, not exactly. Something quieter, like two people standing beside the same fire without speaking. He didn't ask about her past, and she didn't ask about his. But he started showing up, small ways, always quiet. Chopping firewood and leaving it by her door. Fixing the creaking hinge on her gate. One morning she found her roof patched, the leak gone, and knew it was him, though he never said. People noticed. They always did. Mara heard the whispers behind her back again. The widow and the drifter. Maybe he was using her. Maybe she was desperate. Maybe it was both. But Mara didn't care anymore. She'd stopped caring what they thought the day Nolan Frisk dragged her through the mud and no one lifted a hand. Nolan didn't take the loss lightly. He stayed out of Mara's sight for a few days, but he wasn't the type to forgive a bruise to his pride. He cornered her behind the general store one morning, pressed a hand to the wall beside her head. You think that stranger's gonna stick around for long? Think he'll keep you safe? She didn't answer. He's got blood on his hands, Mara. You should be careful who you let walk you home. His breath stank of whiskey and bitterness. She pushed past him without a word, but the tremble in her hands stayed long after. That night, she found Silas sitting on the edge of the stream just beyond town, throwing pebbles into the water. He came to me today, she said. He didn't turn. Did he touch you? She hesitated. No. He was quiet for a moment. Then, he will. Mara sat down beside him. The water moved slow, moonlight brushing its surface like lace. You've hurt people before, she said. Yes. Are you running from them? No. Then what? He stared out at the dark trees across the stream. Some people are made to watch others burn. Some are made to carry water. I never knew which one I was. She looked down at her hands. You didn't hurt me that night. That counts for something. They sat in silence after that. But it wasn't empty. It felt full of something unsaid, something too big to speak out loud yet. By midweek, Mara had begun to feel pieces of herself returning. She started fixing the garden behind her house, pulling weeds and setting the soil. She mended old curtains and let sunlight into the cabin for the first time in months. People still stared, but she didn't care. She had her work, and she had her quiet. And sometimes, in the evening, Silas would stand by the fence while she watered the rows of beans and squash, and they wouldn't speak, but the silence was soft now. Then came Josie. She arrived on horseback, wild-eyed and worn thin by the road. She wore a man's jacket and kept a knife in her boot. Josie was Silas's younger sister, though it took a full day before Mara found that out. She didn't trust easily. Who's the widow? Josie asked, sitting on the step of Mara's cabin, arms folded tight. I'm Mara, she said. And you? Josie smirked. Trouble, and you're letting my brother get too close. Mara didn't answer. I'm not saying it like it's a bad thing, Josie added after a moment. Just that he doesn't stay. He's always moving on. Always has. Is that because of what happened in Carson's Hollow? Mara asked softly. Josie went quiet. So you heard. I heard a man died. He did, but not by Silas's hand. He was defending someone. A girl, just like here. But folks don't remember that part. Mara nodded slowly. Her heart ached more than she expected. She didn't want Silas to leave. She didn't want him to run again. The next day, the sheriff posted a notice at the town square. Wanted for questioning, Silas Reed. No explanation. No details. Just a message. Nolan's doing, most likely, or someone else who didn't like the feel of change. That night, Mara found Silas by the stream again. You need to go, she said, her voice cracking. They're turning on you. He looked at her, eyes tired. I'm not running. They'll come for you. Let them. What? Her hands clenched at her sides. Why stay for me? He didn't answer at first. Then he stepped closer. Because you're the only one I've seen look at me like I'm not already damned. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I can't lose you, she whispered. He touched her face, just once. You haven't had me to lose. And then he left, into the dark like he always did. But that night, he didn't sleep in the shed. He kept moving further out, into the brush, into the unknown, waiting, maybe, or hiding. It was hard to tell with men like him. Mara stood by the stream for a long time after he was gone, her arms wrapped tight around herself. She had opened something in her heart she never thought would live again. And now, she wasn't sure if it would survive what came next. Because trouble was coming. You could feel in the air, thick like storm clouds pressing against the land. And the man who had once walked quietly behind her was about to become the center of everything. The morning was too quiet. Even the wind seemed to avoid dry rock. as if it knew something was coming. Mara felt at the moment she stepped outside, the stillness in the sky, the weight in the air. She walked down to the well with her pail like always, eyes flicking toward the woods where Silas had last disappeared into the trees. He hadn't come back. Not yet, but she told herself he would. He wasn't like the others. He wouldn't leave without a word. She believed that, until she saw Josie waiting by the well, arms crossed, jaw tight. "They're planning something," Josie said, skipping any kind of greeting. "The sheriff, Nolan, a few others. They've been out near the ridge. I watched them from the trees." Mara's hands tightened on the pail. "Planning what?" Josie looked at her, like the answer should be obvious. "They want him dead, Mara. Not questioned. Not brought in. Dead." Her stomach turned. "He hasn't even done anything here. They don't care. He humiliated one of their own. He made them feel weak." Mara stepped back, trying to breathe. Her cabin, her safety, all the things she'd begun to rebuild. It all felt fragile now, like dry paper left out in the rain. I thought if we just kept our heads down, it'd pass," she whispered. Josie shook her head. "You don't know how men like Nolan work. They don't forget shame, especially not when it's served in front of a crowd." They stood in silence for a long time. Then Mara did something she hadn't done in months. She went straight into town, chin high, boots slapping dust. She walked right into the general store, past the townsfolk who watched her like a storm rolling through. She slammed her hand on the counter. "Where is he?" Nolan leaned against the shelf of beans, smug, hands in his pockets like he'd been waiting for her. "Who?" "You know who." He smiled, lazy and slow. "Funny. You never came looking for your husband like this." The room went still. Mara didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of you. You should be." "Where is he? You really think he cares about you?" Nolan's voice dropped low, cruel. "You're just another broken widow to him. You think you're different? He's done this before. Comes into town, finds the nearest helpless girl, plays hero, and disappears when it gets hard. Ask Josie. She's cleaned up after him more than once." Mara stared at him, a chill running through her spine. "You're lying." He leaned closer. "You sure?" Her fists clenched at her sides. "If anything happens to him." "It won't," Nolan cut in. "If he stays gone." And just like that, the trap was clear. They weren't after justice. They were baiting her, using her. If Silas returned, they'd kill him. If he didn't, they'd let her live in the wreckage of what they'd broken. Mara left without another word. The door slammed behind her, and the town swallowed her up again. Back at her cabin, she found Josie saddling a horse. "I'm going after him," Josie said. "I'm going with you." Josie raised an eyebrow. "You don't even know where he is." "I'll find him." So they rode, out past the stream, beyond the ridge, into the thick brush that twisted like claws around the hills. Josie led the way, fast and fierce, her eyes always moving. Mara followed, her stomach knotted, her mind racing. What if Nolan was right? What if Silas had disappeared the moment things got dangerous? What if she'd let herself believe in a man who was never going to stay? But around dusk, they found him. He was hidden deep in a ravine, a fire smoldering low beside him, one hand on the butt of his pistol. His eyes were dark with exhaustion, his shoulders heavier than she'd ever seen. "I told you not to come," he said, voice low as they rode up. Josie swung off her horse and crossed her arms. "You're lucky we did. They're hunting you." "I figured." "Then why stay out here like a sitting duck?" she snapped. Silas looked at Mara. "Because if I went back, they'd use her to pull me in." Mara slid off her horse, boots hitting the dirt hard. "And if you stay out here, they'll hurt someone anyway." "Me." "Josie." "Someone else. Nolan won't stop until he's got blood." Silas looked down at the fire. "I don't want you near this." She stepped forward. "You don't get to decide that." He said nothing. His jaw tightened. "You helped me when no one else did," she continued, voice cracking. "You made me believe again, Silas. You don't get to run and pretend none of it mattered." He looked at her, eyes full of something raw. "It mattered. Then come back." "I can't." And then Josie, who'd been quiet too long, burst. You always do this. You get close, you make people believe you'll stay, and then you vanish the second your past catches up. This is different. It's not, she snapped. Carson's Hollow, St. Ellers, Creekford. You left all of them with blood on the ground. I was the one who came after you every time. Mara stared between them. You told me you didn't kill anyone. Josie flinched. Silas closed his eyes. Did you? Silas's voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. The man in Carson's Hollow, he hurt a child. A girl. The sheriff wouldn't do anything. So I did. And the others? Only the ones who deserved it. Mara stepped back. So it's true. It was always true, Josie muttered. Silas stood. I don't regret any of it. But I never meant to pull you into it. You didn't pull me in, Mara said. I walked in, but the betrayal still cut. Not because he'd killed. She'd seen what the law allowed, what it ignored. It cut because he hadn't told her. Because the silence between them had been built on lies. Suddenly, a crack rang through the woods. Gunfire. All three dropped low. Silas drew his weapon. Josie scanned the trees. They're here, Silas growled. Move. They mounted fast, racing back through the brush, hooves thundering against rock. The shots followed them, distant at first, then closer. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. This wasn't a threat anymore. It was happening. At the ridge just above town, Silas pulled them to a stop. We split, he said. You two ride in, get the sheriff's office barricaded if you have to. I'll draw them off. No, Mara said. You'll die. It's me they want. I don't care. Silas leaned close, pressing something in her hand, a small leather pouch. Give this to the sheriff. Inside's a letter and money. Proof of what Nolan's been doing. Bribes. Protection deals. It's all there. She stared at the pouch, stunned. Why do you have this? Because I've been hunting Nolan longer than I've known you. And that was the twist she hadn't seen coming. He'd come to Dry Rock on purpose. Not by chance. Not as a drifter. He'd come to bring down the man who'd terrorized her. And all along he'd let her believe it was coincidence. You used me. I didn't mean to. At first, it was just about him. But then, he looked away. Then I saw what he did to you. And I couldn't stay out of it. Mara's hands trembled. You should have told me. I couldn't. You've been lied to enough. The gunshots came again, closer. Go, Silas said. Please. But Mara grabbed his coat, pulled him close. You die, and I'll never forgive you. He kissed her then, sudden, fierce, not gentle, like it might be the last thing he ever did. Then he turned and galloped toward the trees, drawing the men away. Mara and Josie rode into town, the sky blood orange with dusk, guns echoing behind him. The sheriff was asleep at his desk, drunk again, until Josie kicked the door open and threw the pouch on his chest. You want to say what's left of this town? She shouted. Then wake the hell up. The sheriff sobered fast once he saw what was in the pouch. He read the letter, his face going pale. This is from the judge in St. Louis. He's had it for months, Mara said. He just needed someone brave enough to bring it. Within minutes, the sheriff and two deputies rode out with Josie. Mara stayed behind, hands shaking, heartbreaking. She stood in the doorway of the office, eyes locked on the trees where Silas had vanished. It felt like hours before they returned. Blood on Josie's sleeve, a limp in the sheriff's leg, and a figure slumped in the back of one of the horses. Mara ran. Silas was alive, but barely. A bullet had grazed his side. He was conscious, but weak. He wouldn't kill Nolan, Josie said, her voice hard. Said it had to be the law this time. Nolan had been dragged to jail, kicking and cursing. Mara knelt beside Silas, pressing her forehead to his. You came back. His voice was hoarse. Told you. You hadn't lost me yet. She held him there, breathing his breath, feeling his heartbeat. The betrayal still stung. The lies still hurt. But the truth, the real truth, was deeper than all of it. He'd come to destroy the man who hurt her. But somewhere along the way, he'd stayed to love her too. The storm didn't end when Nolan was taken away. It shifted, settled deep inside the people left behind. those who watched it all unravel and now had to sit in the stillness that followed. For Mara, the days that came after felt hollow. Quiet, not the peace she'd hoped for, but a heavy silence that curled around her ribs and wouldn't let go. Silas was still alive, but barely. The wound along his side festered, and the town doctor, who had always kept his distance from her, now came reluctantly each day to check on him. He never stayed long, never spoke much. The townsfolk didn't look Mara in the eye either. They had cheered when Nolan was dragged down the street in shackles, but their relief curdled into something else once the dust settled. Embarrassment, guilt, resentment, because they'd watched her suffer. They'd let it happen, and now the man who had stopped it all was the one they had whispered about in corners. She sat beside Silas every day as he drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes sweating through the sheets, sometimes so still she pressed her fingers to his throat just to be sure he was still breathing. He didn't speak for the first 3 days. On the fourth, his eyes opened and stayed open. "You stayed," he rasped, throat dry. Mara gave him a sip of water. "Of course I stayed. You shouldn't have. You say that a lot," she said, brushing hair off his brow. "And you're always wrong." He smiled faintly, then winced. "I thought I was going to die out there." "I know." He turned his head to look at her, and I was ready to. "That scares me." Her chest tightened. "Why?" "Because dying felt easier than staying, than living with all this." She swallowed hard. She knew what he meant. Even now, with Nolan gone and the worst behind them, there was still a hollow ache inside her. She didn't know how to live beyond fear, beyond shame. She didn't know how to let herself be loved without expecting it to be taken. Silas reached for her hand, but she pulled back. He frowned. "What's wrong?" Mara looked away. "You lied to me." He didn't answer right away. "You came here hunting him. You knew what he'd done before you ever met me. You said nothing." "I didn't lie," he said softly. "I just didn't say everything." She looked at him then, pain sharp in her eyes. "That's not a difference." He sighed. "I didn't know how to tell you. You were already half broken when I met you. I didn't want to be the one to finish the job." Her shoulders tensed. "You think I was weak?" "No." He struggled to sit up a little. "I think you were tired. And I think no one ever gave you a reason to trust again." Mara stood, pacing the small cabin. "You weren't supposed to be another secret, Silas. You were supposed to be safe." He didn't speak. He let her pace. She stopped near the window, watching the townspeople pass. Some avoided her gaze. Some stared too long. "Do you know what it's like," she said, voice trembling, "to be touched by a man who believes he owns you? To be dragged through mud while your neighbors pretend not to see? Do you know what it's like to have no one?" "Yes," Silas said. She turned. He nodded slowly. "Not in the same way, but yes. I've been hurt, abandoned, used. That's what made me good at surviving, not at staying." "So what now?" she asked. "You just disappear again?" "I don't want to, but you will. I'll stay if you ask me to." That made her laugh, bitter and soft. "And give you another reason to resent me when things go quiet again? When the days get long and the town still looks at you like you're poison?" "I don't care about them." "But I do," she said. "And that's the problem. I want you, Silas. But I don't want a war in my house every time someone knocks on the door." The room went quiet. He looked down at his hands. "You think I'll turn into him?" She didn't answer. He nodded once. "I'll go." "No." His head lifted. "You don't get to decide this time," she said, voice shaking. "You don't get to take the weight of everything and carry it off like some lone rider. We both have to sit with what happened. We both have to bleed a little." His eyes shone with unshed tears. "Then what do? We heal," she whispered. "Even if it hurts. Even if we're still angry." And it did hurt. Every day that followed felt raw. She avoided the places she used to walk. She didn't go back to the garden. She slept on the floor beside Silas because she couldn't bring herself to sleep in the bed where she once dreamed of the family that was stolen from her. Josie stayed, watching over both of them. She was sharper now, less wild, more weary. One morning, she sat beside Mara on the porch. "You don't know him forever," Josie said. "I know. but you do owe yourself peace. And if he brings more storm than shelter, you've got to know when to let go." Mara looked at her. "You really think he'll ever stop running?" Josie's jaw tightened. "I think that's up to you. And whether he believes someone like you could love someone like him, even with all the broken pieces." It rained the next night. A slow, steady rain that soaked the earth and cooled the air. Silas was strong enough to sit up by then, though every movement hurt. Mara cooked quietly while he sat in the chair by the fire. Neither of them spoke until the thunder rolled far in the distance. "I wrote you something," he said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his coat. Mara took it and opened it slowly. His handwriting was rough, uneven, but the words inside made her knees weaken. It wasn't a love letter, not really. It was a confession. Everything he'd never said, about the towns he'd fled, the people he'd helped, the moments he'd regretted and the nights he couldn't sleep. About the way he'd watched her that first day, carrying that wood, and known something inside her matched something broken inside him. And at the bottom, "If I leave, it won't be to run. It'll be to keep you safe. But if you ask me to stay, I'll never leave again." She folded the letter slowly, set it on the table. Then she looked at him. "I don't want to ask," she said. He blinked. "Why not?" "Because I want you to choose." And for a long time, he said nothing, just stared at her like he was seeing something for the first time. Then he stood, shaky but steady, and stepped close. "I'm choosing you," he said, "even if I don't know how to be chosen back." Tears ran silently down her cheeks. She reached for his hand, held it tight. The pain didn't disappear. The past didn't rewrite itself. But for the first time in years, Mara Bell didn't feel like she was standing alone. And that was enough for now. The air felt too thin the morning the final betrayal surfaced. Not with a shout or a gunshot, but with a letter in a stranger's hands. Mara had just stepped outside, the scent of wet earth still clinging to the breeze after a night of rain. Silas had been improving each day, slow but steady. He could stand now, eat more, talk without gasping. He had even started fixing her broken front steps, stubborn as ever, limping from one plank to the next while she protested from a porch. They'd found a kind of rhythm again, not quite peaceful, but close. That's when the rider arrived, dust-covered, face grim, badge pinned crooked on his chest. He didn't smile, didn't tip his hat, just handed Mara the envelope and said, "Need to speak with Silas Reed. Official business." She took the letter with shaking hands, stepping back as the man dismounted and walked toward the porch like he already knew what he'd find. Silas had just come out the door behind her, wiping sawdust from his palms. The moment he saw the rider, the life drained from his face. The man didn't draw his weapon. He didn't need to. "You're Silas Reed?" "I am." "Then you're under arrest for the murder of Marshall Gregory Tane." The words split the world clean open. Mara's head snapped toward Silas. "What?" Silas didn't answer right away. His eyes were locked on the rider. "He's dead." The man nodded. "Body turned up 2 months ago in Rivergate. Knife to the ribs. You were seen leaving town the day after. Witness put you in the saloon with him the night before." "That's not," Silas started, then stopped himself. His jaw tightened. "He's really dead?" "You sound surprised." Silas looked away. Mara's stomach twisted. She stepped between them. "This is a mistake. He's been here. He helped put away Nolan Frisk. He saved this town." The rider didn't blink. "Doesn't matter. There's a warrant. He'll get a trial." "A trial?" Josie had come out from inside, voice sharp. "He won't make it to the courthouse. You think men like that Marshall didn't have friends? He'll be dead in a week." Silas didn't argue. He looked at the letter in Mara's hand. "Let me see it." She gave it to him. His fingers shook as he unfolded it. He read the page once, twice. Then he nodded. "It's real." Mara's heart dropped. "Then it's true." He looked at her, a strange pain in his eyes. "No, but I understand why they think it is." "Silas." He raised a hand. "He wasn't a good man, Mara. Not even close. I met him in Rivergate. He was running girls through back doors of the saloon. Really young girls. I tried to get someone to stop him, but the law there was crooked. Always had been." She swallowed hard, voice barely working. "So what did you do?" He didn't answer right away. We argued. He drew on me first, but I didn't kill him. I walked away. The silence between them filled with doubt, sharp and thick. "Do you believe me?" he asked. She didn't speak. "I need to know," he said, eyes begging. "After everything, do you believe I didn't do it?" And she didn't know how to answer. Because yes, she wanted to believe. She wanted to cling to the man who held her hand in the mud, who fixed her roof, who whispered, "You're not alone." But now she wondered what other pieces he'd left out. How many other silences were hiding something bloody? Josie stepped beside them. "We need to leave. Now." Silas didn't move. "I'm not running again. You think they'll give you a fair trial?" "No, but I'm tired of hiding." Mara shook her head. "You can't do this. You just got here. I've been running since I was 17, and all it's ever done is get other people hurt." She grabbed his hand. "Then let me come with you." His eyes filled with something heavy. "You don't know what you're asking." "I do." The writer cleared his throat. "It's not up to either of you. He's coming with me. Today." The cabin door slammed behind them as the sheriff stepped up onto the porch. "Let's hold a minute." Mara stared at him. "You knew about this?" He nodded slowly. "Letter came in yesterday. I didn't want to believe it." "Do you?" The sheriff looked at Silas. "Don't know, but I owe that man my life after what he did to Nolan. So I'm giving him a day. One day. Then I have to follow the law." The writer protested, but the sheriff waved him off. "He's not going anywhere. And if he is, I'll be the one to bring him in." And with that, the writer turned and left, promising he'd be back by dawn. The moment he was gone, Josie pulled Silas aside. "We can make it to the canyon pass by nightfall. Hide out for a few days. Let things calm down." Silas didn't answer. Mara followed him back inside. Her chest ached. Her hands shook. She slammed the door shut and rounded on him. "You keep saying you want to stay, but every time someone shows up with your past in their pocket, you just stand there like you're ready to be buried." "I've done things, Mara." "So have I," she shouted. "You think I'm proud of surviving? You think I don't hate what I've let happen to me, what I've endured in silence?" He looked at her then, really looked. She was shaking. Her face was wet. "I'm tired too," she whispered. "But I want something better than this. And I want it with you." Silas stepped close, reached up, and touched her cheek. "Then I'll fight." She nodded, breath catching. "Good." But before she could step into his arms, Josie burst through the door. "We've got a problem." "What now?" Silas asked. Josie held up a crumpled envelope. "The marshal's death wasn't 2 months ago. It was 3 weeks. Someone altered the warrant." Mara froze. "Why?" "I don't know. But whoever did it wanted Silas out of this town. Bad." Silas's face darkened. "Nolan." "He's locked up," Mara said. "Not alone. His brother works out of Rivergate. He's still got power." They all stared at each other. Josie swore under her breath. "They're framing you." Silas nodded. "Looks like it. So what do we do?" Mara asked. Silas exhaled. "We give them what they want." Mara stiffened. "No." "I go back with the writer." "No." "And you stay here. Safe." "I said no," she shouted, tears streaking her cheeks again. "You think I can survive another man walking away from me like I don't matter?" Silas stepped forward, his voice thick. "You do matter, which is why I'm doing this. I won't let you." Josie slammed her hand on the table. "Then we go. All of us. Together. We find proof. We clear his name. And we make them regret ever coming near this town." Silas hesitated, then nodded. "We ride tonight." The fire inside Mara had returned. Not the kind that burned, but the kind that kept you alive. That night, as they packed their bags, the town around them still whispered, still doubted, still watched through drawn curtains. But none of that mattered now, because the truth was no longer buried. It was bleeding in their hands, and they were done letting other people write their ending. They rode through the night. The moon followed them like a quiet witness, casting silver across the road, catching on every branch, every twitch of shadow. Silas led the way, jaw clenched, eyes ahead. Josie rode, just behind, pistol at her hip, sharper than ever. And Mara, Mara rode with her heart pounding harder than hooves, her fingers gripping the reins like they were the last thread tying her to something solid. They didn't speak much. What was there to say? Everything had been said in stares, in goodbyes refused, in the silence between sentences. And yet the unspoken truth hung over them. This ride was either a beginning or an end. By dawn, they reached the edge of Rivergate. The town was still stirring awake, shutters opening, shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, coffee steaming on windowsills. No one recognized them, at least not yet. They tied the horses out of sight near the old grain mill and crept toward the saloon where Silas had last seen Marshalltown alive. Inside, the stink of stale whiskey and sweat still clung to the wood. The barkeep, a sunken-eyed man with a bent spine, squinted at them. Silas walked up to the bar, slow and steady. "We're looking for a girl," he said. "Young, brown hair, scared eyes. She worked here a few weeks back." The man's lip curled. "You cops?" "No." "Then I didn't see nothing." Josie leaned across the counter and slapped a coin down. "Try again." The man pocketed it fast. "She was here. Tane brought her. Said she owed him. Left with him that night." "Where?" Mara asked. "Upstairs. Back room. Anyone see him after?" The man's mouth twitched. "He left alone. But that don't mean he stayed that way." Mara's gut clenched. Silas nodded, turned to Josie. "We need to find the girl." It took hours. Door to door. Name after name. Most folks wouldn't talk. A few slammed doors. But finally, at the edge of town, they found her. Her name was Lila. No older than 16, thin as a broom handle, with a hollow look in her eyes. She was staying with an old laundress who had taken her in. When she saw Silas, she went still. Then she whispered, "You didn't kill him." Mara knelt in front of her. "Tell us what happened." Lila nodded slowly, voice shaking. "He was hurting me. Silas pulled me out. Told me to go. Said he'd handle it. And did he? I don't know. I ran. I thought he'd killed him too. But then someone else came. A man with a scar. He asked about Silas. Said he had business. That was the last I saw before I ran to Miss Wynn's house." Josie's eyes narrowed. "Scar." Mara looked at Silas. "Nolan's brother." Josie nodded. "I'll bet anything on it." With Lila's story, they had more than rumor. They had truth. But truth without proof wasn't enough. So they rode to the sheriff's office in Rivergate, walked right into the den of wolves. It could have gone wrong. Should have. But justice, real justice, comes in strange ways. The sheriff in Rivergate wasn't as dirty as everyone believed. Turns out, he'd been looking into the Tane, killing himself, but political pressure had forced his hand. With Lila's statement and the altered warrant Josie had saved, he had just enough to tip the scales. Within a day, warrants were issued, not for Silas, but for Marshall Tane's remaining associates, including Nolan's brother. News spread quick. Back in Dry Rock, the air shifted. People changed their tone. A few came by Mara's house with awkward apologies, small offerings, fresh bread, a mended coat, a quiet word of thanks. She accepted what she could, refused what she didn't trust. Josie, after weeks of fighting and searching, said her goodbye on a warm morning. She hugged Mara tighter than expected, then turned to her brother. "You're still a mess," she said. He smiled. "Takes one to know one. Don't waste what you found here." "I won't." She mounted up and was gone. Silas stayed, not out of guilt or fear of running, but because for the first time in his life, he wanted to be seen without hiding. He helped rebuild the schoolhouse, taught a few boys how to work a fence line. He smiled more, still quiet but softer. Mara took longer to trust again. She still woke in the night, sometimes breath shallow, remembering the sound of Nolan's voice, the way her own silence used to feel like a cage. But the hand that reached for hers now wasn't cruel. It didn't demand. It didn't punish. It waited. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned gold, she stood in the garden Silas had helped her replant. Tomatoes growing wild, squash curling at the edges, green beans climbing the wooden lattice. Life, real life, where death had once lived. Silas stepped beside her, watching the sky. You ever think about leaving? He asked. Sometimes, she said, but not as much as I used to. He nodded. I'll stay as long as you'll have me. She smiled barely. Then you better fix the back fence tomorrow. The cows keep getting in. He laughed. Yes, ma'am. The wind moved gentle across the grass. The kind of wind that didn't feel like warning, but like permission. There wasn't a wedding. No grand ending. Just days. One after the other. Some quiet. Some hard. But all theirs. And maybe that's what healing really looked like. Not forgetting, but planting something in a place where pain used to be. Letting it grow. Letting it stay. Letting love be the final word.